Unit 8 Gandhian Perspective on Development. Contents 8.1 Introduction, 8.2 Khadi and Village Industries, 8.3 Education, 8.4 Economic Progress and Real Progress, 8.5 Swadeshi, 8.6 Alternative Viewpoint, 8.7 Conclusion, 8.8 Further Reading. Learning Objectives. After going through this unit, you will be able to explain Gandhian concept of development, the importance of indigenous technology in the process of development, and the difference between material progress and meaningful development from Gandhian perspective. 8.1 Introduction. Gandhian perspective on development is distinct on two counts. It prioritized one, self-development over material prosperity, and development of villages, rural industries, and working at the grassroots over modern machinery, technology, and mills. Gandhi toured the entire country extensively using different methods of transport ranging from bullock carts to trucks. He is also known for traveling long distance on foot. Thousands of people would collect to hear him or even to get a glimpse of him. Most of his endeavors were geared towards social and economic uplift of the downtrodden, the poor, and the helpless. In this unit, we will begin with Gandhi's ideas about missionary in a general sense and Khadi and village industries in a specific sense. We then move on to the concept of education and what meaningful education should consist of. This leads us to the concept of material progress and development. Gandhi makes a distinction between material progress and real progress. For him, real progress is rooted in Swadeshi. It may be understood that missionary, education, and economic upliftment are the core issues of development. We end with an alternative viewpoint which questions Gandhian perspective of development. 8.2 Khadi and Village Industries. Gandhi's family believed that the essence of Swadeshi consisted in producing enough cloth to wrap each Indian, which would be possible through spinning and weaving by the masses. The people needed to pledge themselves to the use of Swadeshi cloth only. He added that the use of Khadi cloth for covering the body has greater implication. In his own words, Khadi must be taken with all its implications. It means a wholesale Swadeshi mentality, a determination to find all the necessaries of life in India, and that too through the labor and intellect of the villagers. That means a reversal of the existing process. That is to say that instead of half a dozen cities of India and Great Britain living on the exploitation and the ruin of the 7,000 villages of India, 7 lakh villages of India. The latter will be largely self-contained and will voluntarily serve the cities of India and even the outside world, is so far as it benefits both the parties. The potential to produce Khadi lying at the fingertips of an individual makes him or her empowered and proud of the identity. For Gandhi, Khadi was a means of uniting the Indians, of acquiring economic freedom and equality. More importantly, Khadi makes the decentralization of production and distribution of the necessaries of life. Box 8.1 The Spinning Wheel. If we feel for the starving masses of India, we must introduce the spinning wheel into their homes. We must therefore become experts, and in order to make them realize the necessity of it, we must spin daily as a scarment. If you have understood the secret of the spinning wheel, if you realize that it is a symbol of love of mankind, you will engage into no other outward activity. If many people do not follow you, you have more leisure for spinning, carding, and weaving. The spinning wheel was a means of the economic upliftment of the poor and the despised on the one hand, while on the other hand it afforded considerable appeal on moral and spiritual grounds. The town in the country that had flourished at the expense of the village now had the opportunity to compensate the villagers by buying cloth which was spun and woven in the villages. This initiative went to a long way in knitting economic and and sentimental ties between people in the village and in the towns. The spinning wheel became the central rural development, anti-malaria campaigns, improvement in sanitation, settlement of disputes in villages, and several other endure for enhancement of quality of life in villages revolved around. In one way or the other, the spinning wheel. It provided an alternative means of livelihood to the unemployed and underemployed people. For Gandhi, its adoption by the common people marked the protest against industrialization and materialism. More importantly, the use of Khadi reflected the faith and commitment of masses to the practice of obtaining the necessities of life through the labor and intellect of the villages. This marked the empowerment of the people in villages by making them self-sufficient and generated the confidence and potentiality in them to overthrow their exploitation by the city dwellers. The use of Khadi also ushered in the process of decentralization of production and distribution of the basic necessities of life. Gandhi urged congressmen to promote Khadi rigorously. Gandhi said that other village industries stand apart from Khadi primarily because they do not involve voluntary labor in large numbers. These industries may continue as a handmaid of Khadi, but they cannot exist without Khadi. It may, however, be added that Gandhi did agree that the village economy would not be complete without the operation of village industries. Those of hand grinding, hand pounding, soap making, paper making, tanning, oils pressing, and others of this kind. What lay at the core of this thought was the urge to make the villagers self-sufficient. He maintained that improvisation of India was inseparably linked with the increasing use of machinery. He noted that the hand weaving as an occupation continued to thrive well in Bengal and other places where cloth mills were not established. On the contrary, the condition of workers, particularly that of women workers, was deplorable in Mumbai, present-day Mumbai, and other cities where mills are set up. As a corollary, a boycott of a machine-made goods in favor of the handmade goods would infuse new life in the social and economic condition of the country. He added that since it was not easy to close down the established functioning mills, it was appropriate to register resistance and protest at the time they were being set up. He was deeply convinced about the ability of the village people when we argued that no machinery in the world was a match for the willing hands and feet of village people, and of course the few simple wooden instruments that they make themselves. Gandhi was convinced that agriculture did not need revolutionary changes. The Indian peasant required the introduction of spinning wheel, not the hand loom. This was because the hand loom could be introduced in every home, unlike the hand loom. The restoration of the spinning wheel would solve the economic problems of India at a stroke. The Old India Village Industries Association, with headquarters at Maganwadi, supported those industries in the villages that did not require help from the outside. The village could be run with little capital. It was hoped that such industries in the villages would generate employment and purchasing power in the villages. Interestingly, the association took up itself the responsibility of training village workers. It published its own periodical, the Gram Udyog Patrika. Reflections and Action 8.1. What is the importance of spinning wheel in Gandhi's scheme of development? 8.3. Education. Gandhi firmly believed that basic education was an important means to develop the body and the mind. This stood out in sharp contrast to the common understanding of the concept and function of education as knowledge of letters and of reading, writing, and arithmetic as the basic constituencies of primary education. He said that there was a need to improve all our languages. India should adopt Hindi as the universal language for the country with the option of writing it in Persian or Nagari characters. Further, the English books that are indeed valuable needed to be translated into different Indian languages. Box 8.2. Gandhi on religious education. My head begins to turn as I think of religious education. Our religious teachers are hypocritical and selfish. They will have to be approached. The mullahs, the Dastrus, and the Brahmins hold the key in their hands, but if they will not have good sense, the energy that we have derived from English education will have to be devoted to religious education. This is not very difficult. Gandhi was convinced that excessive emphasis of English education would enslave the nation. He was sure that those who have received educations through a foreign tongue could not present the masses because the people do not identify themselves with such persons. In fact, they are identified more with British than with masses. It is commonly believed that people educated in the foreign tongue are not able to understand the aspirations of the masses and therefore cannot speak on their behalf. On contrary, instructions imparted in vernacular leads to enrichment. Gandhi went to the extent of saying that the problems of village sanitations and others would have been resolved long ago, and the villages panchayats would have been a living foray suited to the requirements of self-governance. He did accept, however, that it was not indeed possible to do without English education altogether. At the same time, adding that all those who have studied English needed to teach morality to their children through the mother tongue. Those who confine themselves to education in foreign languages undergo strain and often commit themselves to imitating the West. This has far-reaching result on both the body and mind. Ideally, the school should be extension of the home, which means that there should be no gulf between the impressions which the children gather at home and those in the school. What he was asking for was a continuity in terms of social environment and value system at home and in the school. For Gandhi, education did not imply spiritual knowledge or spiritual liberation after death. In essence, knowledge consists of all that is imperative for the service of the mankind and for liberation, which means freedom from enslavement to domination, and from the ambit of one's own created needs. Education, therefore, has to be geared in this direction. According to Gandhi, our ancient system of schooling and the education imparted in those schools was enough because character building was accorded the importance it deserves. For Gandhi, character building was a basic in any education system. The basic objective of meaningful education was to generate the potential in children to create new world order. This, Gandhi felt, was possible by the way of engaging in socially useful labor, that is, labor in the service of welfare of humankind. The idea formed the basis of his Nai Talim, which was conceptualized in the way that would involve a harmonious development of the body, mind and soul. The process incorporated involving in craft and industry as a medium of education. The hub of his ideas on education rested on the mission to place learning of a craft at the center of the teaching program, whereby spinning, weaving, leather work, pottery and metal work, basket making, bookbinding and other such activities that were often associated with the lower caste people of untouchables were performed by upper caste peoples, and literacy and acquisition of knowledge, which are the prerogative of the upper caste people, were available to the untouchables. He wanted the schools to be self-supporting, or else providing education to all the children would never become a reality. Further, financial independence would bring with it freedom from intervention by politicians and political parties. The issue of adult education was crucial to Gandhi. Though adult education he envisaged to open the minds of the adult peoples to the greatness and the vastness of the country, and to generate awareness about the ills of foreign rule by word of mouth. It was widely realized that several villages are ignorant of the evils of foreign rule and of the means to overthrow it. He sought to combine education through word of mouth with literary education. 8.4 Economic Progress and Real Progress. In a speech delivered on December 22, 1918 at the Muir College of Economics, Society, Allahabad, Gandhiji candidly addressed the question, does economic progress clash with the real progress? Economic progress largely refers to the material growth and advancement, often without a ceiling. What is commonly argued in favor of material growth is the necessity of providing for the daily wants of people much before thinking or talking about their moral welfare. Moral progress is wrongly believed to come along with the material progress. There is no denying that the requisites for survival are food, clothing, and shelter, but for this there was no need to look up to economics or its laws. Box 8.3 Gandhi on material progress. I should not have elaborated my point as I have done if I did not believe that, insofar as we have made the modern materialistic craze our goal, insofar are we are going downhill in the path of progress. Hence, the ancient ideal has been limitation of activities promoting wealth. This does not put an end to all material ambition. We should still have, as we have had in our midst, people who make the pursuit of wealth their aim in life, but we have always recognized that it is a fall from the ideal. It is a beautiful thing to know that the wealthiest among us often own that to have remained voluntarily poor would have been a higher state for them. You cannot serve God, and mammon is an economic truth of highest value. We have to make our choice. Western nations are growing under the heels of the monster god of materialism. Their moral growth has become stunted. They today measure their progress in pounds, shillings, and pence. American wealth has become the standard. She is the envy of other nations. I have heard many of our countrymen say that we will gain American wealth but avoid its method. I venture to suggest that such an attempt, if it were made, is foredoomed to failure. We cannot be wise, temperate, and furious in a moment. I would have our leaders to teach us to be morally supreme in the world. He firmly believed that working for economic equality called for abolishing the conflict between capital and labor. In operational terms, this means bridging the wide gulf between the rich and the poor and the haves and have-nots. Gandhi adhered to the doctrine of trusteeship. Unemployment and underemployment in villages were because of acute pressure on land and absence of supplementary industries. He realized that the decay of the village industries tightened the noose of poverty around the neck of Harijans. Removal of untouchability and economic amelioration, therefore, were inextricably entwined with each other. Against this backdrop, Swadeshi acquired new urgency. He asserted that it was not enough that an article of use was being made in the country. It was important that the article was made in the village. He explained that some articles produced in villages might cost more than those produced in towns and cities, but one should still purchase them because purchase of this article distributed wages and profits to the poor and to those in dire need. Reflections and Action 8.2. From Gandhian perspective, what is the difference between material progress and real progress? The Gandhian approach to the development in the real sense was directed at the poorest of the poor, from whom acquiring 2 square meals a day was uncertain. In one village, he said, "Empty your pockets for the poor." This was his own one-line speech. Money spent on all that exceeds the bare requirement for survival was treated as wasteful. Alternatively, it would be used for providing meals to the poor. Box number 8.4 Gandhi on non-possession. Rich have a superfluous store of things which they do not need and which are therefore neglected and wasted, while millions are starved to death for want of sustenance. If each retained possession of only what he needed, no one would be in want and all would live in contentment. As it is, the rich are discontented no less than the poor. The poor man would fain become a millionaire and the millionaire a multimillionaire. The rich should take the initiative in disposition with a view to a universal diffusion of the spirit of contentment. If only they keep their own property within moderate limits, the starving will be easily fed and will learn the lessons of contentment along with the rich. 8.5 Swadeshi. Gandhi's perspective on development hinges on the concept of Swadeshi or home economy. In operational terms, Swadeshi called for self-governance, self-reliance, self-employment of people particularly those in villages. Economic and political power in the hands of the village assemblies would significantly reduce their vulnerability to the outside market forces and enable the villagers to develop a strong economic base and give priority to local goods and services. The village community then would emerge as an extension of the family with cooperating individuals who share a common bond rather than combating individual, each of whom seeks to establish himself or herself over others. Box 8.5, Gandhi's Village of Dreams. In one of the letters to Jawaharlal Nehru wrote, "The villages of my dream is still in my mind. My ideal village will contain intelligent human beings. They will not live in dirt and darkness as animals. Men and women will be free and able to hold their own against anyone in the world. There will be neither plague, nor cholera, nor smallpox. No one will be idle. No one will wallow in luxury. Everyone will have to contribute his quota of manual labor." The principle of Swadeshi implies the use of indigenous products and services. Gandhi explains the articulation of Swadeshi in different spheres of life. One who follows Swadeshi restricts himself or herself to the ancestral religion, that is, use of the immediate religious movement. Similarly, in the domain of politics, Swadeshi implies making use of indigenous institutions. In the domain of economics, Swadeshi implies the use of only those things that are produced indigenously. Now, in stress on the use of homegrown and home-crafted products, Gandhi is no way implied that defects and deficiencies in this should be overlooked or allowed to be perpetuated. Instead, he stressed that the defects and deficiencies should be rooted out. He felt that much of the poverty of the people could be removed if the spirit of Swadeshi has followed with the rigor in economic and industrial life. It was his conviction that if not one article of commerce had been brought from outside India, she should be today a land flowing with milk and honey. He clarified that it was a delusion to suppose that the duty of Swadeshi begins and ends with spinning the wheel. In fact, Swadeshi is a whole philosophy of life which involves dedication to the services of others. Communities practicing Swadeshi would not hanker after unlimited economic growth that becomes a limiting factor to self-development. Gandhi said that creation of unnecessary wanted hampers self-growth. Moreover, the rise of unprecedented economic growth leads to competitions and strife which are destructive. Swadeshi, on the other hand, is the way to peace with oneself, with the neighbors, and with nature. It then is a kind of religious discipline to the undergone with the total disregard of the physical discomfort it may cause to individuals. A person who is committed to Swadeshi is not excessively concerned if a particular article that he or she needs is not available because it is not produced indigenously. The people learns to do without it and without several others which he or she may consider unnecessary. Box 8.6, Who is a Swadeshi? A voluntary of Swadeshi will carefully study his environment and try to help his neighbors wherever possible by giving preference to local manufacturers, even if they are of an inferior grade or dearer in price than things manufactured elsewhere. He will try to remedy their defects but will not, because of their defects, give them up in favor of foreign manufacturers. 8.6 Alternative Viewpoint. Development and progress as goals are based upon an ideal world of buttons as solutions wherein increasingly impressive and complex tasks are accomplished by the push of a button or the switch of a lever. Gandhiji argues, however, that the technologies of creations of comforts are also able to generate discomfort and destruction. He points out that what is good for saving lives may lead very quickly to a spin-off production that ends life. The mechanical principles that allow the construction of ambulances and trains are also the basis for constructions of guns capable of killing thousands in the most of border skirmishes. In case of lawyers, for instance, conflict resolution is so painless and so sanitized that motivated lawyers advance quarrels instead of repress them. Similarly, doctors become so good at cleaning up the damage one can sustain that people stop being careful or coping with their pain. As Gandhi put it, I am cured, I overeat again, and I take his pills again. In both examples, modern civilization first presumes a competitive, unkind, and disconnected subjects, then designs a systems to treat that subject. It is here that the myopia of modern civilizations become apparent. While particular act may seem justifiable, for example, one man ploughs a vast tract by means of steam engines and can thus amass great wealth. In a broader context, this may be less so. Mass mechanized farming may produce more, but it may also destroy crop diversity, flood the local market, displace workers, cause pollution, and be unsustainable only with a very limited short term context would it scientific and even optimal. Gandhi opposed what he considered a colonial attempt at reducing the world to its component parts. As he prophetically complained, they wished to convert the whole world into a vast market for their goods. For him, this would be to rob the world of its important spiritual and personal content, to enslave it into being a commodity. Against this perception, Gandhi offers the model of real civilization as rooted in spiritual and intellectual tradition. Gandhi does not advocate a simple destruction of the edifices of modern civilization, but contests and opposes its ideological tenets, calling for a change in our mentality, the way we think. Of course, Gandhi's critique was not without ample, though often meaningless, responses from defenders of development. The retorts usually focus on both the comparative failure of Gandhi's paradigm to produce more on the ignorance and anarchy associated with the traditional. These arguments were classically symptomatic of the kind of myopia and paranoia of modern civilization's assessment of others. For Gandhi, one of the dangers of this disclosure was its ability to convince people to think within the framework of development, progress, and civilization. This encouraged a kind of Orientalism in them, wherein no one is superior to the Promethean defenders of development, and all others are judged by the internal standards of technology. Many claimed the village was a bastion of ignorance and violence. Gandhi's rejoinder is simple: just to criticize modern civilization is not to endorse all things that are not modern civilization. Enemies are not necessarily our friends. Rather, Gandhi supported the idea to prevent ignorance, poverty, and viciousness in the village, but not going about doing this by the means of modern civilization. While critics would understand that Gandhi's vision of Hind Swaraj was not interchangeable with savagery, they did think that it both encouraged primitivism and that modern civilization was a better solution to those problems than what they considered realistic alternatives. To an extent, others did agree with Gandhi. It was often because they thought they had found a useful a strategic tool they could salvage from Gandhian thoughts. This fundamentally misses the point of the critic because it tries to incorporate its conclusions back into the system it critiques. Instead, the real source of impasse between Gandhi's critics and modern civilization defenders was the incommensurability of their discourses. Gandhi considers Nehru as a political ally, as the best of options and a personal friend. However, they never saw eye to eye on issues of development and technology. Gandhiji described this as a big difference of opinion between them. Instead, Nehru took Gandhi's criticism as an obscurantist text and restated the tenets of modern civilization. He felt it might not be perfect, but if we can provide better homes for more people, then we must do that. Nehru deployed the typical demand of almost organic immediacy as a requirement for practice of the theory. Congress should not lose itself in arguments over such matters, which can probably produce great confusion in people's minds, resulting in an inability to act in the present. 8.7 Conclusion. It may be understood that the Gandhian perspective on development is holistic in the sense that it encompasses social, economical, and spiritual growth in the synchrony. The two major themes that were undercurrents in some of his most influential writings and speeches in the context of development were the use of the spinning wheel and the importance of Khadi and local self governance and self reliance for social and economic development. What is more important to note is the fact that it does not emphasize material progress and growth. Instead, it argues in favor of self development and self reliance through decentralization of control. We were sure that empowering of the village people and strengthening the village economy were critical factors in the process of development. In fact, meaningful development was one in which the principle of Swadeshi, among others, were adhered to. 8.8 Further reading. Gandhi MK, Hind Swaraj or India Home Rule. The selected works of Mahatma Gandhi, Volume 3, and Mahatma Gandhi, a biography. These are few readings. So this is the end of the Unit 8.